Turn me around, it's something that I just can't understand the way I behave. Some people you can never save. In my right hand, got a girl on my ear, and on my left hand, throwing back a prayer. What can I say? On me, you see clear.
So it all started with a murder investigation and a ghost. You had a friend named Terrence that you grew up with in the Ninth Ward. Tell me about Terrence. What happened with him?
Terrence and I grew up in the same neighborhood. I hung out at his place often, and he hung out at my place. We just kind of did stuff, kicked around, and had a good time. As we got older, we kind of drifted apart because, well, I became a warden, and he went on to work in the financial sector. And we just kind of lost touch. But we had kind of regained some of our friendship. He invited me to go help at the soup kitchens, and so I started doing that with him when I could, and he was the same way. And funnily enough, that's how we I met Miranda, because he'd been a friend of Miranda's. But yeah, so that's what we were doing. We would see each other in the soup kitchens and touch base, but we had jobs and life.
And then he turned up dead.
Yeah, and then one day I was reading the paper, because as the warden, I like to keep track of what's happening around me, because sometimes it's the supernatural that's causing those things and not, your everyday person. But I came across that his obituary, and I was shocked.
And it was murder, right?
Well, it was a suspected murder. They didn't know who it was. They didn't have any suspects as of yet. They were investigating it, and it was really weird because he had this strange burn mark on him, on his chest, right. And that's all it said. It didn't tell you where, because you know how papers are, and so or the police are. So I decided to go investigate.
And it turns out you were the one who killed him.
Yeah.
And it kind of caught up with you a little bit. You had just moved into the warehouse district, had kind of kicked out some ne'er-do-wells who were living in a warehouse and turned it into your own. And within the first couple weeks of you being there, Terrence's ghost showed up. So tell us about that.
Yeah. I was just sitting there reading my book, and all of a sudden his apparition appeared and wouldn't say or do anything, just stared at me. Kind of creepy, a little hard to sleep. So I ended up going to the bar and drinking a little bit. Came back and he was still there. Yeah, and then eventually I called, I think I went to the church first, and then tried to get their help, and then they pointed me to Miranda, who then pointed me to the warden, and then I ended up getting Bunk and Darwin as well, because Darwin had some kind of
ghostly issues at his house that they had taken care of. Yeah.
So he might need some. He might have some information or be able to give some more help on that.
Right.
And then we went to the Never Never.
Because something was feeding Terrence from the Never Never, keeping his ghost working and alive. And when you went into the Never Never, what'd you see?
This really ugly, big, black tower.
Yeah, right.
There were a bunch of little Grim Reaper dudes too that messed up Bunk pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were feeling pretty confident when we first walked in there, and then Bunk zapped one of them, and he almost got killed.
Yeah, right.
We were like,
Nearly lost an
whoa,
arm.
this is a lot more dangerous than we thought.
So in the tower, the first place when you went into the tower, it turns out you were kind of reliving, I guess, scenes from Terrence's life.
Yeah, it was weird.
And the first floor of the tower was what?
So we walked on the first floor of the tower, and all of a sudden we're back in the 80s, late 70s, 80s.
I feel like 80s or something like that.
Yeah. And
playing video games.
I was a
and drinking
kid,
Kool-Aid.
and we were playing video games. Miss Claire was bringing us all the red Kool-Aid we could handle, and we were having a good time. And and then I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I was like,
you initially threw off the spell that made you think you were 8 years old and playing video games, right?
This is weird. I mean, this is great, but is this a dream? And then, I think when I started questioning what was going on around me.
And it wasn't Miss Clara, it was some weird, smoky, ghosty monster, right?
I definitely preferred the vision to what was left behind.
Definitely.
So you defeated the evil Miss Clara, and then went to the second level, and that was what?
cubicle farm for like, is it like
Brett Merrill?
stocks?
Morgan Stanley.
Sorry,
Stanley.
Morgan Stanley. I knew it was finances. Morgan
Yeah.
Stanley.
Okay, finances or stocks or something like
Right,
that.
right, yeah.
Everybody was able to break through that one pretty well.
But you got some interesting information. One, it turned out that
Yeah.
Terrence was pretty well placed in the company. He was very
Right.
good at what he
He
did.
did very well.
But you saw someone who was kind of important to you. Who's that?
Right. Well, when
Sydney St. Clair.
I
Yeah.
think also we broke out of it faster because since we'd been through the first
Mm-hmm.
tower and we're like, oh, this is. So when we got to the second tower, I'm like, I don't need an investment advisor. I don't have any money. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
So that helped. But I'm sorry. What was your question again?
But you ran into your old mentor, Sydney
Yes.
St. Clair, right?
I saw Sydney St. Clair,
Mhm.
who trained me to be a wizard.
Right.
Um,
What was he
I
doing
saw
there
him
with Terrence?
talking to Terrence, and I just thought that was really, really weird. And then it came out that he was training Terrence, and well, actually, what I saw was he was offering Terrence power.
Right.
I'll give you power, and Terrence, I'd never felt anything magical from him. I mean, we'd hung out together pretty much our young lives, so I don't know what the deal was, why he approached him. But yeah, he said he'd offer him great power, and
Right.
I knew it wasn't good.
So you got out of the second floor and made your way to the third floor, and you made the interesting discovery that when you got to the third floor, you were now trapped inside a blonde woman's body who was being sacrificed in the middle of a pentagram, right? And couldn't get loose, right?
Very different than how Volt usually is.
Yeah, right.
Big, strong dragon man,
Yeah,
hard to
right.
contain.
Right.
And now is this frail, petite, blonde
Yeah.
woman chained to a table.
Right.
Yeah.
But the rest of you got up there pretty quickly. Terrence was there, but he was in kind of a wraith form.
Yeah.
Eventually, you guys defeated him.
Mhm.
And his final words were, "Here's my heart," because I think you realized that was what it was that kept him
Yeah.
alive. You've always had it anyway, and then
Yeah.
you, of course.
I saved him.
You
I
saved him.
liberated his soul.
And then-
like I did in the
Vaporized.
beginning. I never murdered him. I just saved him.
Well, and
And-
that was one of the other things we found out.
Yes,
we
that
found
was-
out that actually Terrence had hired,
Yeah, he
you
hired
in the
me
first
to,
place to
to
kill
kill
him
him.
Right.
because he felt his goodness and his soul slipping away. So that actually,
Turning to evil.
while you had murdered him, he had asked you to because he didn't want to become an evil creature that could control.
All part of the plan.
That's right. That's right.
So I went from the seething rage, looking for who had killed him, was going to take him down and kill him, to what do I do with this?
Yeah, right.
It's like suicide by proxy or something. But and then also I think when I took his heart or whatever, didn't a lot of that come to mind that he told me what all had
Right.
happened and what had occurred.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah.
it was then that I knew that Sydney St. Clair was teaching him the dark
The dark
side,
way.
and he couldn't
But
back away from
you didn't turn to the dark side.
Right.
He
So how did he teach you?
I don't
That's
think-
kind of like the weird question. Like,
Well, I don't
if
think
it corrupted Terrence, but not you.
Well,
Or maybe
because-
he's teaching something different.
growing up, I was the good sister. I did the thing. I was always defending people and helping people and whatever. I have a sister who was always, she was hanging with the thugs and doing petty
Maybe
crimes.
she's just
and
saving
stuff
them
like
like I
that.
saved Terrence.
Okay. Before I have to hurt you.
Now,
No.
the
So I
person-
mean, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's personality, and maybe there was something in
but
him that
Terrence
he
wasn't
bent
bad,
to
right?
that. No,
But
he wasn't.
interestingly enough, the person who first pointed out to you that Terrence had been killed and had been murdered was actually Sydney St. Clair's sister.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
there seems to be a bit of a sibling rivalry going on there. Maybe that'll be
Come up
unraveled
later or something.
Later,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. Well, either way, done with Sydney St. Clair. I really hadn't been around him much either. I think I'd already been done with him for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, I would say probably, just he would try to lean to certain bents, and
I wonder if
I'm just not going to do it.
I wonder if Terrence was an experiment.
Well, we don't know, but remember that Sidney St. Clair and his sister are also parts of a very large group of magical people in New Orleans called the Divinays. And basically all of them are magically active, generally at pretty high levels, and they generally come from the more wealthier members of society. Interestingly enough, most of the wealthier members of society in New Orleans are magically active, and so are their children,
Yeah.
which is kind of a weird anomaly and makes you wonder if maybe
Money buys
There's something
powers.
else going on.
something is
Or
going
buys
on.
packs.
Or buys packs with maybe something
Yeah.
else.
Some denizens of other worlds.
So after you had, I guess, freed Terrence to the afterlife and had defeated him in the Never Never, his funeral will be coming up in probably about a day or so. Tell me about what happened leading up to that.
Well, I started investigating what actually happened to Terrence and how he died because he wasn't that old. And I'd gone to the police station to get some information, and of course, they weren't very helpful. They didn't seem to know or understand it, and so they kind of just moved it along. And I had gone to see Miranda about it to see if she knew anything.
Yeah, we were kind of crossing paths during the investigation because she knew him from childhood and I knew him from volunteering with the various charities and things that I worked with through the church. And so we were kind of following different avenues and kind of accidentally converging during our search for kind of closure on like what happened, how it came to be that he'd gotten in that situation.
Which made it
Running
kind of
into dead-ends.
which made it kind of appropriate that when on the day of the funeral, you guys rode together, I guess, on the bus. Right. So
Well, yeah,
tell me about that.
but we also had run into each other previously because of Terrence.
Right, yeah.
He served at a lot of the soup kitchens and whatever, and I would go volunteer sometimes just as his friend before, I became a warden and things got busy.
Yeah.
And then, and she was serving there obviously because she's a street preacher.
So tell me about the day of the funeral. What led up to that?
I remember making. I think I commandeered Darwin's kitchen to make macaroni, crawfish macaroni.
Yeah, he did.
And left a big mess. And you brought.
I brought cookies.
Cookies, and we decided to ride together to the funeral and go. Pay our respects. And,
Right.
On public transportation. 'Cause
Right.
That's how we roll.
Right. I know that Volt showed up in his typical Volt style, wearing all black, carrying a black rose, and I believe he dropped it into the grave at the graveside. Typical Volt stuff. At the funeral, in the church, you noticed that Sydney had come and sat by Miss Clara.
Right.
And what were you concerned about with that?
Well, I was concerned because I knew that he was responsible for Terrence's death, and that he was trying to feed Miss Clara a line of whatever. And I was also afraid that he was going to try and offer her money and do things for her to get his hooks into her. I don't know what he'd do with that, but it just seemed very suspicious to me how much effort he was putting into this.
And he did offer her money. You found that out when you were at her house
Right.
later that day, right?
Right. And also later that day when I was visiting with her, I warned her to not have anything to do with him, that he wasn't up to any good. And if he came around, to let me know. And yeah.
So I was talking with Trevor, who runs Darwin, earlier today, and we were talking about that Devil Man was actually one of the first mysteries that you guys had gotten involved in, that you were looking out for the homeless people in New Orleans, and that you had heard of the Devil Man there. Tell me something about what you'd heard that the Devil Man was doing to the homeless people in New Orleans.
So yeah, we were getting kind of scattered reports of deaths, in the areas of the city where, there are a lot of homeless, and that being kind of my jurisdiction of like where I do my community service, if you will. I had people that were sort of connections, like Al, who is a homeless man in the area, and sort of reached out to see if I could like get an idea of what was happening. And it was kind of like a urban legend spreading on the street, sort of, boogeyman situation. The deaths were unusual. There was like burn marks, the chests cavities were opened, I think, hearts burned out or something like that.
Which is kind of what had happened to Terrence. And so I think initially everybody was thinking, whoa, the Devil Man got Terrence. We found out, of course, that wasn't true.
Right.
But that's where we were on that. So you came up with a plan. You found out the Devil Man, I think through some research, was drawn to fear.
Yes.
So tell me what the plan was that you two came up with.
We'd worked together previously,
Yeah.
and you had made me an item that allowed me to lure vampires, I believe.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Through despair, and then I was just like, can you recode this to
For fear.
for fear? Yeah.
Right. And it worked a little too well, and that had to do
Yeah.
with something that was going on at your house. What was going on there?
Yeah, it turns out that the little shotgun house that I had, that I bought, uh, had a bit of ghost problem.
Mhm.
So after finding that out and then trying to look into it a little bit, found out that some things had happened in the house previously.
Right.
But just kind of figured, oh, I'll be fine. We'll just kind of let things be as they are. Let's go ahead and try to work on this little project that Miranda gave me. And as the project started, and we really started getting into it. Then, we got a little bit more souped up because of the paranormal activity in the area than anticipated.
And that was one of the things you started to realize with the ghosts in New Orleans are starting to get really amped up about something. Something was stirring them up. So you had your lure for the devil man,
Yes.
and you went out on your first hunting mission for him, and what happened?
If I recall, that was not a super success. We did attract something, just not what we were fishing for. First of all, backtracking to the brooch,
Yeah.
working a little too well, I touched it and became almost incapacitated with fear.
right.
So it was like,
Yeah, getting some gloves and kind of taking away from her is like,
yeah, really spicy bait.
Yeah,
just,
Sure. So the bait wasn't the problem.
Right,
It
right.
was working.
Yeah.
And we went out and I, patrolled. One, maybe 2 nights, something like
Well,
that.
the first night you were looking for, I remember you ran into some other predators that fed on fear, some white court vampires.
Yes.
yes.
And they took a big interest in Folt.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
that's true.
And that's kind of an ongoing
Shine.
story we haven't resolved yet. But then the second night was when you actually got the devil man to show up.
Yeah.
True.
I wonder about that still. We had to just suffer a little bit for him to.
And you guys killed him, right? Or whatever happened, right? Or at least you thought you had.
Right. Well, we thought we took him down, but we felt pretty confident about what had happened that night. In any case.
And you recovered his stick,
Yes.
which turned out to be the staff of Suleiman.
Yes.
Yes.
And that drew him back, I think, the next night to Della's house.
Yeah, which was shenanigans. Yeah, I went to. I showed up sort of serendipitously because of sort of an ability that Miranda has to just sort of be in the right place at the right time.
Right.
And
The hand of God. Right.
yeah, Della would have been alone in that scenario, and I remember. I think I set off a trap
You
or an
called her.
alarm.
You
That's what it
called
was.
her on her
I
cell phone.
called her while she was
Yes.
trying to be quiet and basically alerted the devil man to her
Right.
presence. So,
The one time her cell
was-
phone actually works. Right,
Mhm.
sure.
right, of course it would work then.
Right.
But yeah, it was shenanigans. But luckily, no one died.
Right.
So,
And the final resting place for the staff of Suleiman is in the, I guess, reliquary beneath the St. Louis Cathedral?
right.
Yeah, because we handed off to Gabriel Beaumont, right?
Right.
Right.
And Deacon Fontainebleau, right.
Deacon Fontainebleau, yeah. They took charge of that. Didn't we do some sort of a ritual? Did you do some sort of ritual beforehand to sort of
Yeah.
uncurse it or
I think that was Della and me who we worked a little bit on it to see if we couldn't lift what.
The devil man had done to it.
Yes.
Right. And you were successful. You were able to unchain him. Literally, there were mystical chains around
Oh, that was
him.
the
Yes,
reason
that's
he
what
kept
it
coming
was.
back. It wasn't you had to, break the curse.
Very true. Although I will say, so speaking back to the vampires, the level of acting that went on that first night was
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, we had some pretty funny cases where everybody was pretending to be drunk and nobody was buying it. Not at all. It's pretty funny. I am so drunk.
Yeah, it was.
All right, so the next part we talked about was there was something going on in the St. Louis cemetery. You had done a little bit of research, found out that seemed to be where the area that was stirring up the ghosts was coming from, and went to investigate. Tell me what you found the first night you went there.
The first night, man, it's been a while. Was the
Ghouls? We had the ghouls there?
Well, you had some ghouls
That's
attack you, right?
Yes.
And you ran into a guy named Oliver,
Yeah.
right? The
We
the
should-
lackey,
Like,
right?
yeah, we tried to talk him into doing the right thing, and
Right.
yeah,
I got to talk to the master on the
our
phone.
master. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
But it was the next night that you guys went with the help from the police,
Right.
the New Orleans Special Task Force, which are kind of the police that are in the know about the supernatural world. And the next
Yes.
night you showed up, hopefully to ambush the master, went into the cemetery. Oliver wasn't there, and things went a little bit south at that point.
I mean, really south, in my opinion.
So what
I
happened to
mean,
you? What happened to you in the cemetery? Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like I just remember walking, and then I was
Grabbed.
grabbed.
Right. And they
Accosted.
drugged you to a, I guess, ritual circle and strapped you to what?
Electric chair.
Yeah,
And so
that's
that's
so
not fun.
No, no,
Don't recommend it.
no. It was hooked up to a car battery, but who knows? Magical electric chairs might not be so good.
Yeah.
And you were caught with the rest of the group in a narrow kind of choke point.
Yes,
With
we
what?
were ending up fighting in between some of these not tombstones, but little
Crypts.
Crypts.
Yeah, big
Little
tall
crypts.
crypts. Yeah, yeah.
and terrifying moment where the was it they had a ghoul with them.
Ghouls to the left of you,
Yes.
ghouls to the right.
Yes,
You were
it's
stuck
so-
in the middle again.
So many ghouls. And I just remember like one of your descriptive things that like they're trying to reach over and they're just like taking big chunks out of the thing. I was like,
That was the big ghoul.
"Ooh."
Yeah, that was the big ghoul. But you guys fought your way through that, right?
Yes.
With a little help from the policemen.
Mhm.
They were fighting zombies in another part of the cemetery, and we had a sniper who I believe kind of creased the forehead of one of the ghouls pretty significantly.
Yes, ghouls are so terrifying. They just
are.
take so much damage.
They are.
And they're
Yeah.
fast, and they have claws, and they eat
Yeah.
meat, and they're just not much fun.
I remember the hunt to try to catch up to you because
Right.
whatever had you was moving fairly
Very
quick.
quickly, yes.
Which it turned out that the people who had you were the actual ones behind the whole thing, a pair of necromancers,
That's
right?
right. I found the lead.
Right, there you go. You found it.
Oh.
And so you were in the middle of the circle, and tell me what happened. How did you get free? Did you die? What happened?
No, so I used my kinetic powers and I destroyed the thing and released it, and then
Right.
it's all kind of a blur after that because I
Right.
remember they escaped.
Right. You guys came in after
Yeah.
them. They couldn't do the ritual. They summoned a bunch of ghosts,
Ghosts.
and then lots of mist, and poof, they were gone.
Right.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah.
And so you followed them to their actual hideout, which turned out to be
The Museum of Death.
the Museum of Death, which is an actual location in New Orleans. And it turned out that the actual necromancers were the owners of the Museum of Death, a man and a woman who are a pair of necromancers.
Yes.
Yes.
I will say, well, without the New Orleans Special Task Force there, I feel like
Yeah.
that whole interaction probably would have went a lot
Oh yeah,
worse.
Yeah.
it's a lot worse.
Cool. All right, we'll kick it off. So we had finished the battle in the cemetery, and you had found a trail that led to the Museum of Death, and we're following Kat and JD, and they turned out to be the necromancers who were also, you had met them earlier when you'd gone to the Museum of Death and done a quick tour. So you followed them that night with the police with you in tow, and tell me what went down.
Well, we had a plan,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of just came apart. I think at the last minute, we split the party, which you never do.
It sounded so good at the time.
It did feel very well thought out,
Mm.
and initially, how did we? It felt like we had a plan.
Well, there was a back door and a
Yeah.
front door,
Right.
and who went in the back door?
I did not.
I
Okay.
did, yeah.
Okay.
It was
back
Vaughn,
because-
front
Volt,
door.
and me.
Because there was the option of being with the police, and that's where I wanted to be.
And that's right.
I
You and
forgot
Volt
about
did
that.
not want to
That's
be with the
right,
police.
okay,
Don't
that's
put us
right.
with the police at all.
That's right.
Oddly
Yeah.
enough, ended up being like the worst place to
Oh,
be.
yeah,
no, it was
Exactly.
awful. It was-
Right. So you came in the front and the back doors about the same time. Pretty good coordination there. And what did you wind up having to face first of all? Ghosts of
Ghosts,
serial
yeah.
killers.
That's
Was
right.
it like Jeffrey
Yeah,
Dahmer?
John
or
Wayne
something?
Gacy,
Gacy,
yeah,
yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer, and several
Oh,
of their
God, yeah.
victims.
Yeah,
It was
I think
kind
I
of
tried to
creepy.
run away
It was
because I thought I was
very
just
weird.
inside of the place, but no.
No. And also you had the drumming, which
Yes.
you knew was what kept the ghosts going. And so you had to deal with the ghosts.
And I guess I didn't even really pay attention to who the ghosts were. I just was I was so intent on where the drumming was coming from.
Right.
I was just trying to get through that.
Right. And you did find that was coming from where? Where was the drumming coming from?
It was from a speaker
Right.
that was further into the building.
Right.
Recording of
A
some-
recording
Yeah,
of
it was
some
just
drums.
a recording
Right,
of the drums,
Right.
which made it hard to find because,
right.
I was
Could be
expecting a
anyone.
person doing it.
Yeah.
Right. So the first person you ran into at the back door, you ran into the ghosts, kind of went through them pretty quickly, and then you ran into who? I believe it was JD who was at the back door.
Yeah, JD was in the back.
Right. And he threw up some nasty spells and stuff like that, but eventually, what happened with him?
We fought him, and she stabbed him and put him away.
Because the warden kind of.
Warden did her job.
Yes, I
and
saw
they don't-
him going down, and he couldn't live.
He
With
begged
all
for
the
mercy,
stuff
and you were like,
He
yeah, no
did.
mercy.
So
Yeah.
I just walked up, took my sword, and went through the skull.
Yep.
And at the time, Volt was not really happy with me about that because he wanted to talk to
Oh,
Volt,
right.
talk to JD.
That's right. That's right.
But, I'm sorry, I gotta go. My job is the ward.
That's
That's
right.
what I do.
So the front door crew, you were with the police. That was you and
And
Miranda.
right?
And you ran into, again, more ghosts of serial killers, but also you ran into Kat, who turned out to be a much more powerful necromancer. She summoned a spell that did what?
It was the.
It was like an AoE of necrotic smoke or
Right,
something. that,
right,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, I kept thinking it was like black kind of like tendrils
Ichor
or
or
something,
something.
kind of
Yeah,
grab
could've been
people.
ichor.
Pretty
and,
nasty. Yeah.
I remember it grabbed one of the officers next to me, and I tried to do something to help him, but you could just see him like withering away.
Right.
I was like,
just
ooh.
turned into human jerky
I
right
think
in
it
front
wound
of
up
your face.
killing 2 or 3 of the
Yes.
officers at that
At
point.
least 2.
Right. And you took a pretty good shot from it as well, if I remember.
Yeah, I didn't get out of that unscathed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that happened, and I think that was a moment where I was like, oh, this is she ain't playing around.
No,
You know,
she's
like
serious,
this was
yeah.
not.
And I
This
think
was not a.
that's about the time you guys came in from the back.
Right.
And that was when you caught her kind of off guard. And
Well, I had killed JD before
Right.
we saw the necrotic stuff.
right,
so
right.
were you still there, Bunk? You and
Yeah, we
Volt?
stayed.
You
We were
stayed?
there. We were.
Okay. And then after I saw that, I kind of like moved outside to the front where the police had come in.
You came in
So I
through the
could talk
back
to
way
them.
because it was all linked together. You
Right.
came in through the front. I think the rest of you were looking for you took one out one of the mild speakers.
Right.
Right.
We're trying to take out the loudspeakers to stop
Right.
the drumming, and
And then you ran into Kat and
then finished her.
finished her.
Mm-hmm.
She was done.
Yep.
Police were called, ambulance was called, and there was a little bit of fallout after that. You had to meet with a guy who turned out to be an ally,
Yeah.
Captain
Johnson.
Brian Johnson, and his basic statement the next day was he was going to have to talk to all the families of the people who died. But next time something happened, he wanted you to go directly through him
Right.
to try and make sure that he could keep people from dying, specifically his men.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the
And-
officers that we worked with that time were just regular cops and
Right.
officer.
And weren't they arranged for us by
Deacon Fontainebleau.
yeah,
Right.
Deacon
reached out to those
Fontainebleau.
Right.
guys.
He's like he knew some guys, and so
Right.
yeah. And they were competent. It's not that they weren't competent,
Right.
but
Well, necromancers
the
kinda icky.
necromancers were a lot more powerful than,
We were expecting.
you know. I mean,
Anyways.
based on their little lackey that they had watching the cemetery, we just didn't think they were very well organized, and all of a sudden they were.
Well, lackey is what he was.
A move.
For sure. But that's also why I moved out to the street to where the police were going to come in, so I could bear the brunt of the questions.
And that's when you and Volt did him out.
Yeah, we went up. Didn't we go up to, there was like a different upstairs and looked in a room or something?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
You did search the necromancer's
Yeah.
apartments above
Yeah.
the Museum of Death, ran across, and you got some of their evil, icky, nasty items,
Right.
and you destroyed them,
There was a grimoire up there, I believe.
except for the grimoire, which Volt rescued at the last moment when you tried to burn it. That's
But
right.
I don't think we know that.
No, you don't know that
No,
you got
none
it.
of us,
Yeah.
none of our
Yeah.
characters don't know
Right.
that
There
Walt
was a
has
grimoire, there was a
that.
recording
And-
up there.
Right. And the next day, you met your new superior officer who turned out to be a warden who had retired.
Oh gosh, what's his name? All I can think is Lucky Charms.
Yeah, he was Irish, that's right. And that was the call in that you had to give to the guy on the other end of the line to verify.
And I wasn't happy because he just showed up. He
Right.
showed up as if, you know, he didn't.
Well, and he'd
Who
also
was
kind
he?
of co-opted your phone numbers too, remember?
Yes,
he
he
sent
just
text.
I remember that.
Did
Yeah.
he leave the group chat after I sent a string of emojis?
Yes,
or
he
was
did.
that- okay.
Good
well,
job.
well, the
Good
group
job,
chat
Amanda.
he had sent to you guys. You're not even sure if it was the real group chat because he had made it look like it was coming from Della's phone,
That's
and
right,
everybody was
that's
kind of like, "Wait, Della's
I'm
phone?"
Yeah,
still not
that's
happy with
very,
him.
very
I'm
confused by
very
that.
interested in how he accomplished that because wizards don't with technology, so that was like that had to be.
He
magical
did it very
nature.
simply with a lackey.
Exactly.
Oh man, I'll say good point because I need to learn. I need to be able to get in on
I
this
was like,
emoji
bro,
thing, but I haven't. My
need a
phone
lackey.
doesn't.
He's
do
sending
it.
us texts and you can't even do that.
I
half
know
the time.
it's so sad.
You need a lackey. That's right. So after finishing the necromancers, some other things have been happening that are kind of taking place in this next season, season 2. You found a young woman who worked at Muriel's, of one of the
Yes.
places that seems to be where everybody hangs out.
I
name
met
is-
her when we were investigating ghosts.
Right, and her name is Carla.
Carla.
And what is she now?
She is my apprentice. She
Oh.
she has a talent. When I first got to Muriel's, you know, I said hi or how you doing, and I was like, oh,
A little zap of energy.
I felt that zap of energy, and I was like, okay. Funnily enough, she has a brother,
Mhm.
and I felt the same zap from him.
Yeah,
Now Carla is all, and she wanted to know more and was excited about all this, and I was like, well, we need more people to help it with the warden, so let's see if she wants to. And I kind of talked to her brother, but I felt he would have just lost his mind if he had to believe that
I
magic
want to say
was
the thing
real.
that kills me the most about the brother, though, is the fact that he literally did the whole quarter trick,
Mhm. Yeah.
and you, as a wizard, knew that was legit magic,
Yeah.
and he was like, everyone can do it.
Yeah,
There's no thing.
it was just a magic trick, right? Yeah. No, you're doing real
And he's
magic,
like,
buddy.
yeah, everybody can do that.
He's in denial, right?
Yeah.
Not to be confused with the Long River in Egypt.
Yeah.
Right. And then the next thing that's happening this next season, and this is our big thing, well, probably the first half of the season, is you and Volt discovered something. And it
Yeah, we
was.
kind of hijacked the campaign for just a minute with lunacy.
It was great.
Yeah, we discovered to tie in with the ghosts, because at Muriel's there's a ghost.
Yes.
And then there with the necromancers, it was stirring up stuff with the ghosts. At some point, we had gone to Lafitte's prior to this,
Mhm.
and I had tried communicating with Lafitte. I have this
Lafitte's
Um,
pub bar.
Yeah,
this
blacksmith shop.
conspiracy theory map, completely crazy,
Like a
that I
little
pull out
tourist brochure
everywhere.
map
Yes.
thing that just
marked up of the city where I have everything pinpointed that I think is going on in the city. And I remember us sitting at the table with the ghost of Lafitte, and he was smoking, and I asked him, if he knew about anything or whatever, and he just put a cigarette out on my map, and then later, your
Ley line investigation.
yeah, that guy, he brought a map that showed the ley lines, and I put my map over your map, and the burn hole in the map that Lafitte had put in my map perfectly lined up with the convergence of the ley lines out in Lake Pontchartrain.
Yep.
Which don't give away too many
Oh,
spoilers
yes.
about where that
Yes,
led you
yes,
guys,
yes.
because
But-
that's next.
Hijinks ensue.
Right.